And welcome to what some might argue is a slightly prematurely holly jolly edition of Ben's Junk. And I think this one needs a little context. So the night that I am shooting this, we've got a bit of a storm going on outside. And I'll stop short of calling it a blizzard, but it's windy as all hell out there. You may very well hear some creaking as I'm doing this. And there is a certain amount of snow involved, but we're not really at whiteout conditions or anything like that. But for whatever reason, it just kind of put me into the holiday spirit, and it got me thinking, oh, there's that Christmas episode of that TV series that I haven't seen in a few years. I should really find that and put it aside, and so I can watch it a little closer to Christmas. And it just kind of led me down a bit of a rabbit hole, and I figured, well, let's make a video out of it. So I do have my favorite TV episodes and my favorite Christmas movies and my favorite Christmas albums, but this time it's just going to be the TV stuff. I can save the other stuff for another year. Now, I do need to do this week because this is the last Ben's Junk week that I've got scheduled for this year. So if I don't do it now, it's going to go on the back burner till next year. But anyway, I wanted this to be a bit of a follow-up, a sequel of sorts to a Ben's Junk I did a couple of months ago on tapes that I repeatedly checked out from the video store and that I eventually bought out of the previously viewed bin or found somewhere else, somewhere down the line. And I'd like this to be, full tilt VHS nostalgia here, but I've only got a few VHS tapes here. Some of this stuff I have owned on VHS, but just don't have anymore, or in at least one case has never been on home video, period, but I'll address each one as I go along here. So anyway, got 8 of them to go through here, and we'll start with, well, actually a couple for our British friends. Blackadder's Christmas Carol from 1987 or 88. And I love Blackadder. Makes me feel smart. But as far as the Christmas episode goes, it's a bit of an anomaly in that if you're familiar with this series, the Brits, of course, call what we in the States would call a season a series. But each season/series, if you're British, takes place in a different period in history. And the Christmas episode does not fit into any of those. It's its own island. That one takes place in the Victorian era. Now, as far as the humor of this, you're probably not going to like it too well if you're not already familiar with the regular series, because the whole idea is, Blackadder is usually a terrible person, and he's always doing these awful things, and of course he always gets his comeuppance at the end of each episode. But they turned it inside out for the Christmas special. So in this case, Blackadder is the nicest guy in the world, and even that manages to blow up in his face. But I think it's really well done. It's one of those ones that I actually do watch every year, guaranteed, and I can only say that about maybe 2 TV episodes. And a bit of a side rant here. So this is the US version of the complete Blackadder. And the Christmas episode is on here, but it's not really listed. It's buried in the bonus features, and you have to just remember what disc it's on. So that's a bit of an annoyance, but a minor one. And it is on here. The quality is just great and all that. So yeah. So since we're doing the British thing, and since we're talking Rowan Atkinson, I guess I better bring out the Christmas episode of Mr. Bean. And I pulled this out of a thrift store bin ages ago. Merry Christmas, Mr. Bean. So, this is kind of funny, I guess. I saw Blackadder long before I saw Mr. Bean. And when I first saw Mr. Bean, I hated it. I thought it was just the most juvenile thing I'd ever seen. But, you know, I was expecting Blackadder. I was expecting that really sharp wit and also just verbosity. And of course, Mr. Bean is just the polar opposite in so many ways of Blackadder. So, the Christmas episode is, I guess, in the greater scheme of things, nothing too special. It's really just the usual shenanigans that just happens to take place at Christmas. But every Mr. Bean episode has a certain rhythm to it, and most of them are just kind of vignettes, and this one's no exception, but it does have a good flow to it. So a little bit of trivia here. Here in the US, we got cuts of this show that were 3 to 5 minutes longer a piece. And that's because this aired on PBS here in the States, public television, non-commercial. And this aired on commercial TV over in England, so it had to fit a 22, 23-minute time slot. Here they had a little more time to fill, so they would load it up with deleted footage. And those are the cuts that made it to home video here in the US on VHS and Laserdisc. Now, I do have the complete Laserdiscs of Mr. Bean, and I just pulled this out for simplicity's sake. But in the DVD, Blu-ray era, the US cuts of Mr. Bean have not been reissued. So you gotta hang on to the old tapes and Laserdiscs if you got them. So a bit of an annoyance. Maybe there is a version of the US ones out there now, but not that I'm aware of anyway. So, The Simpsons. And I used to really like The Simpsons when I was growing up back in the 90s, and then I just stopped watching around 1998 or so. And I haven't watched more than 5 minutes of it since then. But I could have covered this on that one about video store memories, because I did check this out a few times. And this is one of my Blockbuster tapes, albeit one that's, if I can make the light hit it just right, one that was already a bit banged up. And I got this, I think, in middle school, maybe even a little earlier. So if you look at Bart's hair, it may look a little more odd than usual, that water damage. And that's because when I was a teenager, I had a box of videotapes that I kept in my parents' basement. And stupid me, it lived right under a water pipe. And one time the dishwasher failed and water came out everywhere. And this is one of the tapes that got at least a little bit nailed. The tape obviously survived. But yeah, I've actually never bought any Simpsons stuff on DVD. I used to have a handful of the 3-tape sets that were flying around back in the late 90s or so that I sold eventually when I was trying to raise money for one of my albums, one of the many, many things I sold. But yeah, I won't get into the plot of this one. It's kind of a bit of a standard Christmas miracle story. Now, I'm admittedly not very good at Simpsons lore. I haven't actually watched a full episode of The Simpsons outside of this one in many years now. But if memory serves, this was the first full, regular, proper episode. So kind of an interesting way to kick things off. Now, my camera is not screwing up, and you may have noticed this already. This seems a little pink compared to what it should be. That's because this is sun-faded, and this was sun-faded when I got it. So you have real nice, crisp, vibrant color on one side and an absolute horror on the other. So this next one I have owned on VHS, but it was one of the ones that was in those 2 printer paper boxes full of tapes that I gave away a few years ago. But let me start by saying that I liked Animaniacs growing up, but I loved Pinky and the Brain. And so when they got their own show, I was all over it. And so they had their Christmas episode during the first season, 1995. And it has been on VHS standalone. I've already mentioned that. I have owned it, don't have it anymore. But I have actually acquired all the seasons of Pinky and the Brain. But in this case, of course, the usual trope of this show was Brain is trying to take over the world. Well, in this case, they just about succeed, but in this case, they manage to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. But again, it's a very well done one, and I think one of the reasons I really liked Pinky and the Brain growing up, and to a lesser degree Animaniacs, I guess it was kind of one of my first real tastes of satire, and I knew there was something a little heavier and a little deeper going on, and there is some good satire going on here. Not the best that I've seen. I've actually got two better examples of Christmas satire, but yeah, I won't go any deeper into the episode, but it is very well done, and it's one of the rare episodes of the regular series where usually it would be 2 episodes in one time slot, so 10 to 12 minutes apiece. In this case, it takes up the entire time slot. This next one is the only one that doesn't belong to a regular series. I mean, there was a regular series years later, but at the time, I think you know which one I'm referring to here. A Charlie Brown Christmas from 1965. And I have owned this one on VHS. I used to have the Paramount clamshell issue of this from the mid-90s. And like the Blackadder tape, it was one that I gave away when I left Colorado a few years ago. So I won't really discuss the proper episode, just the special, because it's so well trodden. But let me just get off into some other stuff here. So this copy's a little water damaged, but the disc is okay. And I don't even remember the circumstances under which this thing got wet, but yeah, it's always kind of bugged me. This used to have a nice slip cover. It completely disintegrated on me, so I guess the hunt is on for a complete in-slipcover copy. For that matter, the hunt is on for the elusive Betamax issue of this. And it has been on Betamax. I have confirmed it. I've seen one copy on Fleabay and they wanted like $50 for it. And I wasn't paying that much. Now, this particular issue is from 2008, and I'd say it's as close to definitive as exists yet. But this one has been on Blu-ray and 4K now, but I haven't picked any of those issues up because I've heard, at least, that they've cropped the picture and done some other weird stuff, and I just haven't felt like buying a copy to find out. And honestly, I'm actually very happy with this one. The compression settings for a standard DVD are very low on this. I mean, on an upscaling DVD player or Blu-ray player, and you could swear it's just about a Blu-ray anyway. So the only thing that would make this even better in my book would be when this first aired in '65, this was sponsored by Coca-Cola. And the opening sequence where they're singing Christmas Time Is Here actually ends with a plug for Coca-Cola, but it gets faded out. And it's still that version here. And there's another reference to it towards the end of the end credits. It just fades out prematurely. Now, the full copy still exists. I mean, I've seen it. It has been on YouTube. It may not be now. I have a feeling that the powers that be probably don't like it, but there are 16mm copies of the original 1965 cut. Faded as all hell, pretty lousy sounding, but you can at least see it as it aired, and I have seen one with the CBS stuff. So I would love to see that truly definitive restoration someday. The materials exist in some way, shape, or form, but it just hasn't happened yet. And one more point of business with this, for ages, and I think it's still going on, Hallmark had a whole, and probably still has a whole long line of Charlie Brown Christmas ornaments. And my mom used to pick one of those out every year and did so for at least 15 years. And I've got all of those now. And it's just a shame I never put up a tree. I could probably trim a tree completely with Charlie Brown ornaments and Garfield ornaments, although those weren't Hallmark. Now, A Garfield Christmas, 1991. This has been issued on DVD. I do own the DVD. It's actually, I think it's been on DVD twice now. I've got the Fox issue, and it's a perfectly good issue, but I've never been able to let go of this VHS copy. I've had this since the mid-90s, just a few years after it initially aired. And yeah, this is a pretty treacly Garfield special. Usually they're not too bad, but I don't know. I guess maybe it's the fact that it's one, very deep-rooted, and two, the whole idea of the episode, the main plot, what little there is Garfield and the gang go out to visit John's family on the farm for Christmas. Well, so many years my family would come out to South Dakota, and you know, our holidays wouldn't be too terribly far off from this. Of course, a lot more grounded in reality. So there's that much going for it as well. So that does it for the cartoon end of things here. Now, this next one has never had a home video issue, and I don't think it's ever going to, unfortunately. I guess there's some really terrible royalty and rights issues to this series. So, for starters, I'll just pull out this VHS tape here. You Can't Do That on Television. One of my favorite shows of all time, and a show that scared the crap out of me when I first saw it, but I grew to love it, and I just continue to love it more and more and more with each passing year. But this is the worst of, because kind of like Oddity Archive, everything is kind of inverse. And this is the only thing to see any kind of truly official hard copy home video of this series that I'm aware of. This fetches some decent money on Fleabay when it does come up. But yeah, so getting to the Christmas end of things, there was a Christmas episode of You Can't Do That on Television, and my copy was recorded off-air by me on Teen Nick during their Splat sequence, whatever you want to call that, their block, back in 2015, shortly after they launched. And I don't have Teen Nick anymore. But I remember when it first started up, the whole Splat thing, I thought, I took a look at what they were going to show, and I thought, oh man, this is great. These are all the shows I used to really love. And they'd show, I think, 3 or 4 episodes early on, and then it just became all Doug all the time, and I stopped caring. So anyway, this is indeed the Christmas episode as aired on the Splat in 2015. It's still got the on-screen bugs and stuff, which kind of sucks, but at the same time, it's the cleanest copy I've seen since watching this on Nickelodeon during its last years of reruns back in the early 90s. And I have owned this entire series on DVD-R. Operative word, DVD-R. It was a bootleg, and a terrible bootleg. Super data compressed. Let's jam 20 episodes on a single disc. So, yeah, whatever problems this may have, at least the quality is decent, and it appears to be the entire episode. At least it loses nothing from the bootleg I used to have and got rid of. I'm not entirely sure why I did that, but, yeah. So, another little thought about You Can't Do That on Television. It's one of those things, it was probably truly my first real taste of satire. And I can say that the show has been a bit of an influence on me, and sometimes it manifests itself a little more than others. I've admittedly cribbed a little from Christine McGlade as far as how I host archive, although I think it's worn off, or at least leveled off a bit over the years. Now, another thing I really loved about You Can't Do That on Television was, in more recent years, the kids' shows, especially on Nickelodeon, the kids are always really smart and the adults are always total idiots. And the kids always win. Well, that's not how real life works. So here, the adults were usually idiots, but it didn't mean the kids always won. And there were some good life lessons and just some pretty sharp commentary on the state of things then, and that's held up really, really well. So, yeah, absolutely love this show. The only reissue I've seen, aside from the 3 episodes that aired on Splat, was I think about half of the 1981 season, so the first season to air here in the US, was on Amazon Video at one point. I purchased a few episodes of it and then it just disappeared. So unfortunately, it's just one of those things that you'll have to just kind of search around for bootlegs. Somebody who claims to be the rights owner to this show has been known to go around on YouTube striking any episodes. Maybe he's mellowed out a little, but yeah, the rights to this show are just a horrible mess. So anyway, let's close things out with what is truly a tradition in archive land, and one that it's become a tradition to where I post a link to it every year, sometime in the 2 weeks or so leading up to Christmas, to the Facebook and Twitter pages. And that would be the Christmas episode of The Jack Benny Show. And that particular episode is in the public domain, so you can go just about anywhere and watch it, or pick up a cheapy set like this thing. And it was something they recycled, that particular Christmas episode. I think they did it 4 or 5 times. They did it at least twice on the radio and at least twice on TV. And I was talking satire. To me, it's a really great bit of satire. It really gets into the whole consumer culture as it was in the common copy is from 1960. As it was then, most of that still applies today. And I just really love the Jack Benny Show. It's kind of the first meta show. It was, of course, it was on radio first, but Jack wasn't afraid to let you in on, this is just a show. So some episodes would be just what was going on truly as a show. Sometimes it was behind the scenes. Sometimes it was maybe at Jack Benny's house or something like that. So they were able to go in any different direction they wanted. Now, the Christmas episode proper is, it's kind of dark, admittedly, but it's also very funny, but you have to actually watch it, because if I describe it, you'll just go, that sounds horrible. But one of Jack Benny's regulars was Mel Blanc, and of course he's better remembered now for being the voice of most of the Looney Tunes and a whole ton of cartoon voices. But in this particular episode, he's got Mel playing a retail worker. The whole idea is Jack is going Christmas shopping. Jack is a total cheapskate. He drives the guy absolutely crazy, keeps making him rip open the gift-wrapped packages that are supposed to be shipped to whoever he's buying for, and so on and so forth. And he ultimately drives him to at least implied suicide. So, like I said, it's a lot funnier when you actually watch it. But, yeah, I think I'm gonna end it there. So that is it for this episode of Ben's Junk, this very festive one. In my own kind of twisted way. To borrow from Jack, to paraphrase Jack, I'll talk to you again soon.